Danny Ainge says there's no plan for the Utah Jazz. Does no plan actually mean there's a plan? We'll talk about it next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 bum. Pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. Thanks so much for tuning in. On today's show, Danny Ainge meets with the media for his end-of-year session, 40 minutes long, quite insightful. Breaking it into 2 days, today and tomorrow. Today, we will look at Danny Ainge's contention that there is no plan. In the midst of explaining no plan, he might explain what the plan is. He also tells us, at least in my opinion, for the first time, why are the Jazz not fully tanking like the Houston Rockets and losing 60 games in 3 years, but instead playing in this middle ground a little bit, as he does, I think, at that point, show what the plan is for the Utah Jazz. Also, I asked him if there's anybody on this roster who, like Marcus Smart and Kendrick Perkins, that are non-star players that stuck with him that whole time in Boston that have struck his eye. He gives us a name of a player, and we'll look at last night when the dynasty died and OKC got super lucky, plus a few other notes from the presser. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen. We are free and available on all podcasting apps as well as on YouTube. So if you could, subscribe, follow, hit the bell button, give us a thumbs up. Those are all free and much appreciated along the way. Thanks so much for doing that. To the everydayers, you're the best. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, let's get right to Danny Ainge's and the comment that the Jazz, that there is no plan. Craig Bolerjack opened the press conference, kind of tried to ask him about the plan, and then he got kind of, well, you tell me what the plan is. And then that kind of just sat there. And then as we continued, this kind of became the reoccurring theme to what Danny wanted to get across is like, there's no plan. There's no plan. No, I don't think it's that there's no plan. There's some intricacies to it, but it's an interesting concept. And here's what he had to say. And let's go through it. We'll take about 4 different snippets from the press conference, piece them together, kind of get his theme of what he's saying about it. Here's his first one. This is a story he's actually told me in the past, and I'm glad he went public with it because now we can talk about it. That's an interesting kind of perspective on how he built the championship team in Boston.
In Boston, when we were there, and we had Paul Pierce, and Paul was a terrific player, an all-star player, Hall of Fame player, and our plan was we lost 19 games in a row in 2007. And our plan was Kevin Durant. But when the lottery came around, we got knocked back 3 spots to number 5. And our plan changed immediately. And we were able to eventually land Ray Allen and KG, which were never available before that moment in time. But we were there and we were ready. So it took a lot of good fortune. Obviously, it took some bad fortune to go win a championship, because if we'd have drafted KD, which was a top plan, we probably wouldn't have won a championship unless for quite a while as a young player. So, but the bottom line is obviously either of those are very good options. But we didn't have all of those options in front of us. In the NBA, we're trying to find good players, like Jay-Z said. That's our objective. We've been close. We felt like we've been close once in this process that would have changed the dynamic of our team immediately and the direction, and would have been much more clear to your question, what kind of players do you need? Then you have the answer. But that hasn't happened, and we do have assets and we do have flexibility. So we don't want to panic. We don't want to go from the 23rd best team and worst team in the NBA, or 23rd best team in the NBA, to the 18th best by giving up a bunch of things either. Like, that's not our objective. Our objective is longevity and quality going forward.
So a bunch of interesting comments here. That last one is obviously is key, that we're not interested in going from 23rd to 18th. The jump to go to 12th, or what he's talking about, I think is mammoth. I mean, if you watch Zion last night, And Zion was incredible last night until he had the hamstring injury. And if you're an everydayer, you've kind of heard that about a week ago, I said in that game against Phoenix, he put on the 7 most dominating minutes of any player we've seen in the NBA this year. So you now start to couple that you've got Victor Wembanyama and you've got Nikola Jokic and you got Luka Doncic and you got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and you have Ant and you have Zion and you have Devin Booker. Other than Jason Tatum, you probably have 7 of the 8 most dominating players in all of the NBA for the next decade are all right now in the Western Conference. Add the fact that Memphis is going to get better and the West was as good. Certainly we saw the dynasty probably come to an end last night in Golden State, and they're in a tough situation because of it. But, going 23rd to 18th, if we're going to 12th, we got to be jumping some of those teams to get to 12th. I think it's a huge task. So, that's a big comment right there that we're not trying to go from 23 to 18th because 23 to 18th seems doable. 23 to 12th or 23 to 10th, that's a massive, massive jump in there. The other one, the key thing in there is that he has Paul Pierce as this piece of this puzzle, and then he adds to it with Kevin Garnett. And, he's told it to me that they probably would have ended up trading Paul Pierce and then you're building around Kevin Durant, So, it's an interesting that they're looking for optionality, that they have the ability to do these various things. I thought the other key line in there, so we wouldn't have won with Kevin Durant for a while. He has no lack of understanding of, how hard it is to win with young players. And obviously Danny knows what it takes to win. There's no doubt in that. But it's worthwhile. Like the admission right there is, we're not going to win anytime soon if we just keep rolling young players out time and time and time again. Here's more from Danny on the idea of no plan. That was his he mentions it 4 or 5 different times in this 40-minute press conference. It was really the reoccurring theme of the whole thing. Here was the second, maybe not in order, but a second time which he mentioned it.
Like I said, with in the Boston scenario I used earlier, going from the beginning of the season and losing, and we're the second worst team in the NBA, and we get the number 5 pick, which is not going to change our franchise at all. Only the number 1 and 2 picks are going to change it, right? So there's no guarantees in this business at all. That's why you can't just have a plan that is like what you're going to get. Like we didn't have a plan. We didn't have a plan when we traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, the next 2 drafts. Like those things they work out. And but you put yourself in position to do that. Does that make sense? But to answer your question, we're not as far. We're a big trade away, right? So we explored that all last summer.
So interesting that they explored it all last summer. By the way, the player he mentions earlier, who was it? Who was the player? I think it's probably Drew Holiday, unless we were deep into Pascal Siakam and I didn't know it. But I would guess that it was Drew Holiday is who he's talking about. But when we were deep into the Drew Holiday conversations and the Jazz just about pulled that off, that would be my guess to who he's talking about. But again, here it is, this concept and this discussion of that there is no plan. And this is, I would say, contrary to a lot of what we want. We want to know, like, when are we doing this and how's this happening and how's that happening? And those things. And his point is that that's just not how this works. And he even gets more specific to it coming up in a little bit. I'll share with you where I do think like he does reveal a little bit of what the plan actually is and how it works and why we're doing some of the things that we're doing on one of the most heated debates, I think, amongst Jazz fans, which is if we're losing and if we're going to go lose 25 or 30 to close the year, why didn't we just lose 65 games this year and win 17 and get one of the top picks? If we're going to tank, why are we just tanking the whole time? Why are we doing this like middle ground thing and getting caught in the middle where we are good for a while and then we pull the plug? And tomorrow on the show, he's very honest about why they pulled the plug. He gave so much great stuff yesterday, I have to divide it out. So tomorrow we're going to talk about why he pulled the plug. He's really honest about it. And then we'll also talk about Keontae and Taylor and Bryce tomorrow. He had some good things on that. But today we're talking about the idea there's no plan. But what no plan is actually a plan, if you really dig into it. And that's what we're going to get to next. But he's going to talk about another example of no plan. But then he's going to get into really what the plan is and why we're not fully tanking. Super interesting. As well as who is the player that has caught his eye as one that matches the Marcus Smart, Kendrick Perkins model of guys that have, when he was GM, he made all million moves, except for those guys stuck the whole way. So who is it that has caught his eye? Plus, we'll talk about what happened in the rest of the NBA last night. We're just getting started. It is Locked On Jazz today, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Intercap Lending, and that really means we're getting to Steve Carter. And there's just nobody better than Steve Carter over at Intercap. He's our own personal loan officer, and he does just amazing, fabulous work. Let's go to the reviews. Quentin and Jennifer Briner says, we literally heard about Steve on Locked On Jazz show, called the main number for Intercap Lending, and luckily got connected right to him. We were blown away at how quickly our refinance came together. Steve was attentive, honest, and so sharp. We never felt stressed. It almost seemed too easy. How is he so good at what he does? We'll give his name to anyone and everyone that needs an agent. This is universal every time we talk about Steve Carter. Reese Lindsay says, Steve made the purchase of my home so easy and stress-free. I was kept in the loop, and Steve was available whenever there was a question or concern. I use Steve again in the future and recommend Steve to the friends and family. I used Steve again recently, adds onto his review. 1223 with another home, and once again, Steve made the process easy and stress-free. Steve's a professional who really cares, and he shows it the way he interacts with you like all other clients. We'll continue to look to him and refer him to my friends, families, and associates. Well, I'm referring you to Steve Carter right now at Intercap Lending. If you need a loan, Steve Carter is the guy. So give me an email at dlock09@gmail.com, and I'll set you straight up with Steve for your VIP meeting. If you don't want me in your business, call Steve directly at 385-800-8528. But make sure you tell him you were Locked On Jazz so that you can get the Locked On Jazz corporate discount. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. Today's show is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'm competitive, just like everybody else out there. Monopoly Go is filling that vibe for one-on-one battles with buddies or with the group. Here's how Monopoly Go works. They've been downloaded by over 150 million people, and it's a great twist on the classic game Monopoly. You play, but not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, build up amazing cities, and bring you in big money. You can also charge rent on those iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, and watch your buddy pay up to you. You also can rob their vaults of riches and take those riches for yourself. And the leaderboards show who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon out there. It's fun. If you're competitive, you'll love it. You'll team up with friends and family. It's great community as well, all around the world in time tournaments, and earns huge rewards. They've done it all. They've modernized Monopoly, and it's fabulous. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or on Google Play. That's Monopoly Go now on the App Store or on Google Play. It's Monopoly Go, and it's a great deal of fun. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. NFL draft fans, it starts tonight, 5 o'clock your time, 5 o'clock Mountain Time, our time, 7 o'clock Eastern. The 6-part NFL mock draft extravaganza launches and is available for you on Amazon Fire TV or on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 on YouTube. It's at 5 o'clock tonight. It includes every NFL local expert making their pick. It includes college experts, fantasy football angle, draft experts, all breaking it down. It's the Locked On NFL mock draft tonight, 5 o'clock Mountain, 7 o'clock Eastern, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 channel or on your free Amazon Fire TV app. All right, let's do more with Danny. All right, there's more on the no plan concept. That was, as I said, kind of the theme of the whole thing, is that the Jazz, there is no plan. So here is what Danny said about another story involving no plan, and then he gets into Keontae a little bit and how it relates to this season with the Jazz. But this is, again, back to the Celtics, building up their championship teams and their players in his kind of, hey, there is no plan here.
But I'll tell you a funny story about that. And how the plan, everybody wants like this plan, including Ryan. Ryan loves a plan. Like, he's a tech guy. He's got a plan. But I wish basketball were that way. I wish we could just like organize it, plan it. We're going to draft this guy in the future. We're going to trade for this guy in the future. But that's not how basketball works. But we draft Kendrick Perkins out of high school, and he weighed, I think, 310 pounds. He'll try to tell you that he had that he got 28 in the 3-minute run and that he had a 30-inch vertical in the draft workouts, but I think it was 22 3-minute run and 22% body fat. And Hendricks was on this plan where we're just going to develop him. So he had to lose 30 pounds. He had to get stronger. And I remember the first day from my office, I looked down and he's like taking his shirt off in the weight room. He was so proud of himself and how he looked. And he became a big piece of our championship runs. The next year, we had a draft workout with, you guys are familiar with Al Jefferson. Al Jefferson comes in for his draft workout, and Doc goes, "You're not serious about this guy, are you?" I go, "Yeah, like if he's available, like he's probably our guy." He goes, "You got to be kidding me." So I said, "Hey, he's on the Hendricks plan. You know, like with the 19-year-old guys, you gotta like. We got a G League now. We got a whole new strength team. We got so many opportunities for them to grow before they come to have to play with a good Boston team at the time." So anyway, Hendricks, after the first day of training camp, Doc comes into my office and goes, "He's starting. Al Jefferson's our starting big man." And so, like, that wasn't the plan. It wasn't my plan when we drafted him. He's got a lot of things to learn, but that was, I mean, Doc said he's better than our veterans, like immediately. So that does happen too. And so you just don't know. And I think that with Keontae, there was some of that this year. Keontae wasn't our plan for him to be a starter going into training camp. You guys were in training camp. You saw, like, he was good. He was a good player. He earned the respect of the coaches and his teammates, and, like, he earned that job. It wasn't given to him. And I think that that's just, you know, but you don't draft a 19-year-old rarely. There's some that, you know, LeBron at 19 was pretty good. But most of the time they need time to develop. And so we have ways to develop them, and we don't have to.
More there from Danny, just on, hey, none of this you can't draft Taylor Hendricks and say, okay, well, in 3 years he's going to be ready, and Keontae's going to be ready in 2 years, and they're going to be, then our next guy's going to be, and then we're going to be ready to go. But like that's just not how it works. And so that continues to kind of back up his idea that there's no plan. On the other end, David James asked the question that I think every Jazz fan really wants the answer to, which is, wait, a little bit of when you hear Jazz fans say there's no plan, I think what they're really saying is, wait, why aren't we fully tanking? Why aren't we going 20 and 62? Why are we doing this middle road thing where we're caught in the middle? And at least Danny says in this answer that he thinks this has been answered a multitude of times. I actually don't. This is the first time I've heard this. It's really interesting, I think, and it's worth discussion amongst me and you and amongst yourselves and on the chat room and on X about whether you buy this. Like, are you pleased with this? But he explains kind of for the first time that I've heard why you don't just empty the cupboards completely and then try to go get guys.
I think that's a very good question, and I think a lot of people have that. That's been answered a lot too, and for some reason there seems to be some confusion on that. But if we just had a bunch of young players in the draft, we just had 6 draft picks, and we had the ability to go trade for a franchise-changing player, we had to change the whole team. Like, we don't want to go get a franchise, but because we have Lauri Markkanen as an example, as one of our good and others, we don't feel like we have to make a wholesale change. Like, we can try to find, the last 2 years, I'm not sure. Last year we knew what our team was, and I think they surprised themselves and surprised us, like how good that team was to start the season. Again, I will say this, though, that records are deceiving, I think. I mean, obviously it always matters, a record at the end of the season, but I think that our objective is to, find a player or two, and we're ready to roll. We're ready to go big game hunting. And that hasn't happened in the last 2 years. But if we start all over, then we're 3 years possibly or 4 years from being anywhere. We feel like we're closer than that, and we have a chance. I mean, we're going all in this summer to try to figure out what we can do to get better. When I say all in, that doesn't mean that we're going to throw all our chips in and championship or bust. I'm saying our mindset is that we're doing only to try to win. That's our only objective for the first through till we get to July. And if we don't land anything, we don't make any deals, we don't land anything, then our direction could change at that moment and wait till the next time that we can try to build a roster.
So in a sense, there's the no plan again. But on the other end, I think this is really clearly him outlining the plan. And let me use an example I used last week, and it was a hypothetical and it's totally made up, but I think it gives us names to put traction. So I threw this crazy idea that we trade for Trae Young and Karl-Anthony Towns. And you do it without trading for Lauri Markkanen. Then you're ready to roll. We would immediately be a top 5 offensive team. We would immediately be a top 50 win team. That's kind of what a top 5 offense gets you automatically. And so if you are we're ready to roll. Danny's point is, if you suddenly drafted for Karl-Anthony Towns, but you had emptied the cupboard at the very bottom, and then you have one good player and a bunch of young players, you now have to rebuild your whole roster. You're still 3 or 4 years away. Houston might be there. They got to 45, but like as Danny said earlier, we don't want to go from 23 to 18th. Well, they just went from 28th to 18th. He wants to get to 10th or 12th or 8th or 5th or 1. So there's the first time to me that someone has said, like, hey, the reason we're this 500 team or touching, because we want to have quality players around here so that when that player becomes available, if we could have gotten Drew Holiday and you suddenly have Drew Holiday and Lauri Markkanen, and now we have one other piece we need. And you're there and you're pretty good. If you go get can you win with 3 players in the top 30 with Cat, Trae, and Lauri and no defense? That's in my scenario. And I'm not saying that's the right answer. I just think it's 2 players that are probably available and something you can tactically put your fingers on. And so therefore you are ready to go right away. That I had not heard that a lot. I'd heard a lot about competitive games, and I had heard the idea that we wanted to play important games and that's important for development and players and things. And I believe in all that. This was the first time I'd heard somebody say, and maybe I've missed it, hey, we're keeping something in our. We don't want to be the emperor with no clothes when we go get the 2 players. We're keeping some clothes in our drawers so that we actually have a wardrobe. I thought that was really interesting. The last thing he said was maybe the most interesting, which is we're going to go big game hunting, but there's no plan here. If the big game hunting doesn't yield anything and we get to July, we're going to pivot and we're going to change. And maybe at that point, you're suddenly winning 16 games and going for Cooper Flag because you couldn't get anything done. And then that's you need a top 3 pick. Like this guy knows what Jason Tatum does. He knows what Jaylen Brown does. But it's pretty fat. His theme throughout this whole thing, as much as Danny says there's no plan, is the plan is optionality. And the plan is flexibility. And the plan is being able to go when the time is when the world allows it to be available. Now, the one thing that no one asked that I think is super tricky is how do you evaluate trading 2 of your first round picks coming up here when if that big thing happens, you don't want to be one short? That's the question that is going to be nearly impossible to answer for this group. Because I don't think that's an answerable question. So no plan is a plan, but it's certainly not defined, and it's certain got optionality, and it's certainly unclear where we're going to be on July 15th. The July 15th could come, and we haven't been able to make that trade, and we haven't been able to get any free agents because there really is no free agency left, and we've drafted players. And Danny says it's not plan A or plan B or plan C to come to camp with 6 players 20 years or younger, but maybe you end up on plan D. Pretty interesting. I asked him, Marcus Smart and Kendrick Perkins are players you've held on to for your whole run. Who is there on this Jazz team that has done that? Plus some other notes. Another name came up an awful lot yesterday, which I thought was really interesting. And who's playing Summer League and who's not. Plus quick thoughts on the NBA last night as the dynasty died. That's all coming up as we continue on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by Nissan. Have a great adventure with Nissan this summer with NissanUSA.com. Nissan's got the Nissan Rogue. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. It's a class exclusive Google built-in, always updating assistant to call on almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. And the 2024 Nissan Armada will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger, explore further in the 2024 Armada. It is Nissan taking you on your next big adventure, whether it's the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Armada, or even the Nissan Pathfinder. Go find your next adventure at nissanusa.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors with millions of parts for your MVP. eBay Motors is here for you. Hopefully, you won your fantasy league through eBay Motors and the guaranteed fit with Josh Lloyd throughout the year. Well, eBay Motors has 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, and that's why you're always getting what you're looking for with eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. eBay Motors, you're not burning rubber, or you're burning rubber. You're not burning cash. With all the parts you need, all the parts you want, all the parts going to match perfectly. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So whether it's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, or more, whether it's speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered with those 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only. Available to U.S. customers. ebaymotors.com. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Thank you very much for being an everydayer. The mock draft starts 5 o'clock tonight on Amazon Fire TV on the Locked On Sports channel or Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. The massive mock draft. Kind of awesome. All right, one more Danny Ainge piece here in which I asked Danny Ainge if there's any player on the roster who, the way Kendrick Perkins and Marcus Smart had kind of endeared himself to him and lasted for a long period of time, that had done so the same with the Jazz.
Yeah, so, those characteristics are just toughness and, that competitive fire that is their strength over their skills. That competitive fire is what attracted me. Like Tony Allen was another one. He didn't stick with us, but that's a whole nother story. But, I think that those kind of characteristics, I would say the guy on our team this year that exemplified that the most is Chris Dunn. Chris gave us a defensive presence more than anybody else on the perimeter. And so whether it's a 10th man role or a starter, I don't know the answer to that going forward, but I think that he has a role in the NBA. And we liked what he brought to the table.
So a little love for Chris Dunn there from Danny Ainge. The other player who got a lot of love yesterday was Johnny Juzang. Johnny Juzang's name got mentioned 3 times during the press conference. It's pretty strange for a player as a free agent, mostly G League player throughout the year. So worth noting, I think the Jazz really like Johnny Juzang. Maybe he can play the Keon Ellis role of last night. Summer League, Walker Kessler will play. Keontae George will play. Taylor Hendricks will play. Plus Bryce Sensabaugh will play. So interesting to see that. Then he expects to see Darius Bazley and Kenny Lofton Jr. That team should be pretty good. So Summer League should be a lot of fun. That's after 4th of July this year. They've pushed it back a little bit, 1 week back. So make sure you go get your tickets when they are available along the way. Last night in the NBA, obviously the big story is the Warriors dynasty coming to an end. The big story is Oklahoma City just got so lucky again. Oklahoma City doesn't get the Lakers because the Lakers win last night because Zion gets hurt. I think the Lakers could have beat Oklahoma City. They might have been tired by that point, but I think they could have beat Oklahoma City. They're playing pretty well. 2, and they're big and physical, and the Oklahoma City's one weakness is rebounding. Like, it's a thought out. It's logic. So they don't get Oklahoma City. Instead, they're going to get New Orleans with an injured Zion or Sacramento without Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter, who will just be happy to be there because they've had that season. Like, they're going to win that series in 4 or 5 games and be completely rested by the time Dallas and the Clippers play a bloodbath against each other. Yeah, I'm bitter. But Oklahoma City is just like the golden child that gets so lucky all the time. It's crazy. It's going to be interesting to see what the Warriors do. That is the end of the dynasty, I think. When you haven't made the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years, or 2 of the last 4, or what? See, last year they made the playoffs. The year before they won the championship. The year before that, they didn't make the playoffs because of injuries. So we'll see if it's true. Steph's not right. Clay's clearly not right. And Draymond, they're just not the same, right? They have all these young players. They played, I think, the fourth most amount of minutes of rookies, but it doesn't feel like any of those are going to move the meter. I don't know their answer, and it could get ugly fast, though they are probably one of the most appealing franchises from a free agent standpoint. But free agency is pretty dead in this league right now. So this is going to be fascinating to watch how the Warriors get out of this and what they do. And also, they're little rightfully beholden to Steph and Draymond for all their years. I think Clay's probably done. And I think Clay knows it, unless he's going to take a massive pay cut to stay in San Francisco and be a part of the Warriors moving forward. But he also is just, he's moved in and off the bench. He's clearly fading as a player. What he's done is remarkable to keep still playing at this level with the Achilles and the ACL, but they're coming to fruition. 0 for 10 last night was glaring. Keon Ellis is a heck of a find by the Sacramento. Give him credit, out of the Stockton Kings and finding a way to, without third string shooting guard Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk both out, and he finds a way to have that game, play that intensity and play that hard. It's funny. They drafted Davion Mitchell kind of to be that guy. He's not there. I think he was a 9th pick of a draft, and they get the guy who's undrafted out of Alabama to come and find a way to do that. We saw him actually the first time he kind of got hot was against us in the preseason this year. So great find on their part. I think he's been with the Stockton Kings. Stockton Ports is a baseball team. 2 of the last 3 years, or both the last 2 years. So they've worked it. They've developed it. That's what the G League's for. Great credit. Maybe he's our, Johnny Juzang, maybe he's our Keon Ellis. But great job by the Kings to get that one. We'll see the Eastern Conference tonight. Philadelphia seems ready to roll. Let's hope all our guys in Atlanta get their win over Chicago today. And that is Locked On Sports today. A lot of interesting comments. Hope it works. This was the second time I recorded the show, so let's really hope it works. Have a great day. Here is Locked On Sports today on Amazon, on YouTube 24/7. Go check it out. 5 o'clock tonight on Amazon Fire TV, or on YouTube is the NFL Mock Draft.